really great to have you with us again, and welcome to the Living in Faith Everyday podcast, the Life podcast. We're working together through a series I've entitled 66 Books, 66 short podcasts that give an overview of each and every of the 66 books of our Bible. And today we're considering the third book of John, the book of the practice of love. Third John is actually the shortest book of the Bible, a short, intimate communication between a writer and someone called Gaius. So who wrote this letter? Well, 2nd and 3rd John are very alike in many ways, one of which is the way the author identifies himself. Instead of using his name, he uses the term or title, the Elder. Like 2nd John before it, 3rd John gives no other information to identify the author. Tradition, however, indicates that it was John the Apostle, and a comparison of this letter with the other writings of John would strongly support that view. So who was it written to? Who were the recipients? Again, 3rd John, like 2nd John, contains nothing in the book itself that serves as a clue to the date of its composition. Guesses ranged from the late 60 AD through to about 90 AD. The similarity of the contents of 3rd John and 2nd John would suggest a date very close to the writing of the second letter. If that's the case, most Bible experts estimate it was most likely to have been written around 80 AD. Early Christian writers are pretty much unified in their testimony that the Apostle John wrote this book. The letter does not state to which church Gaius belongs. His difficulties were chiefly concerned with a man named Diotrephes, who had worked himself into a position of power in the church. John apparently commissioned a number of travelling teachers and preachers. A team of such teachers, led by Demetrius, the carrier of the letter, arrived with this letter of commendation from John. But this man named Diotrephes refused them and even refused to receive John's letter. We know that from verse 9. They returned to John, report both the hostility of Diotrephes and the hospitalities of someone in the church called Gaius. Now John knew Gaius well. It was he who had led Gaius to Christ. We know that from verse 4. And they were still close friends. The letter says that. Therefore John writes to this layman to encourage him to continue to receive missionaries in spite of the opposition of Diotrephes. He also announced his intention of personally visiting at some point to deal with this situation. Demetrius no doubt delivered the letter to Gaius. So the message, the subject of the book of 3 John is love. Verse 5 states that for us. In John's thought, truth is the foundation of love, and hospitality is one expression of such love. In 3rd John, he contrasts Gaius and showing his expression of love through hospitalities, and Diotrephes, who appears only to love himself, he says in verse 9. The message is believers are to continue the practice of love in the form of hospitality. The structure of 3rd John follows the usual formula of an ancient letter. It contains a salutation, prayer, a main text, and ends with personal greetings and benediction. The breakdown of that is such that verse 1 is the salutation, verses 2 to 4 is the opening prayer, and then the main body of the letter is just contained in the 7 verses, 5 through to 12. It then closes in the last 3 verses, 13 to 14, with that personal greetings and a benediction. The first purpose of 3 John is to encourage Gaius. Apparently Gaius was quite wealthy. He entertained and shared hospitality a great deal. But apparently, although wealthy, he was not very healthy. Verse 2 tells us that. We know also that there's trouble in the church because the strong-willed, headstrong man named Diotrephes was clearly repudiating the authority of the Apostle John, someone who had known and walked with Christ himself. He had suppressed his letter written to the church, and he had refused to receive travelling teachers recommended by John, and he tried to prevent others in the church from receiving them also, even going so far as to excommunicate those who did. Gaius, with his physical problems and the difficulties in the church, would have been easy for him to have stopped offering hospitality to missionaries and to retreat into the background. He could have always used his poor health as an excuse. Furthermore, to continue doing what he was doing was really asking for trouble and conflict with Diotrephes. And this is why John writes primarily to encourage Gaius, to encourage him to continue doing what he was doing, and to tell him not to imitate Diotrephes, and saying not to worry because John would deal with him in the future when he arrived. The second purpose of John 3 is to endorse Demetrius, the carrier of the letter. He was the likely bearer of the letter, but on the other hand, he was very likely to also to have been one of those travelling teachers that John had mentored. Either way, he would need hospitality and support upon his arrival. So John writes to endorse him in the highest possible terms, not just to Gaius, but hopefully to the Christian community there as well. So in summary, John wrote to someone called Gaius to encourage him to continue to practice love in the form of hospitality, and also to endorse this guy Demetrius as someone to be listened to and to be encouraged. And this letter also reminds us that hospitality is an important part, an important way in which we can express the love of God in Christ.